All right. So yeah, we may as well get started. It's about 10 after at this point. So as I think I said last week, or I've been suggesting, my last 4 days starting, I left the house at about 7:30 Sunday morning. I've been down at Ledyard High School working 7 in the morning to 10 at night, doing their accreditation process, which how many of you are high school? We have a couple high school? No, not really. A couple high school. Being part of the NEASC visiting committee is, yes, grueling work, but it is also very rewarding. And I know that sounds like I've been drinking the Kool-Aid, but both times I've done it, you do come back. You just get such an in-depth view of what another school is doing, and through that you kind of learn a lot about what your own school is doing and what you're doing, and you come back with all these ideas and you see things. There were some things going on in this school that, I mean, I'm not supposed to share anything about the accreditation review and anything like that, but this school still has a full metal shop, a full wood shop, a full power mechanics shop. They are an ag school. They have an ag program that schools, 14 towns send their students to Ledyard because they have an ag program there. But it's sort of integrated with the school too. Like the students are in the whole thing. But it's been a while since I've been in a high school where the like doing things with your hands is still really valued. And I kind of hadn't realized how much I'd sort of missed that. I mean, our own school is down to just a sort of a little remnant of the wood shop that they do a couple of little wood projects in, and then all the rest of it is technology and drafting and things like that, which are all good too. But there's something about, like their ag program. If the tractor for the ag program breaks down, they bring it down to the power mechanics shop and the students fix it. Like it's not, they don't send it out somewhere. They just had 4 lambs birthed in the past week. So of course everyone was going out to the barns to see the lambs, and they do that, and they breed tilapia, and they have an aquatics program. And what's that? Well, they have like the ag program. There's the animal program. There's the aquatics program or aquaculture program, and then there's the plants. I forget what but so they've got greenhouses, and they have test farm situations and all this stuff.
You would think there'd be more of that now. I mean, we kind of need that stuff.
Yeah, well, that's one of the things I came away was like, I forget. I mean, when I was in junior high, I took power mechanics, wood shop, I took sewing, I took cooking, I took, kind of all those things, and so much of that seems to have disappeared. So if you're in a high school, it really only applies to high schools, and I know they're completely revamping the protocols. So these big visiting committees may kind of be a thing of the past, but if you have a chance to go on one, I do recommend it. But it does mean that right now I'm kind of running on fumes. I'm going to do my best to remain coherent and to provide you guys with a quality educational experience. But I am running just a little bit on fumes. I drove straight from Ledyard to here without a break. So, all right. So, and I think, so at this point, everybody who's in the room right now has seen Dr. Abed in terms of signing up for courses. So anyone he hasn't seen is somebody who's not here yet. So that was one thing. So just in terms of schedule, this is not a definite. I think I might have mentioned this as a possibility the last time we saw each other. Next week, there's a chance, and as soon as I've nailed it down, I'll let you know, there's a chance that I may have to start class later. My thought would be, we normally start at 5, that we would start class at 6. And I don't want to keep you later than we normally do. I would be willing to stay around if we're doing group work and a group wants to stay until, say, 8 or so. I'd be willing to stay that late, since we'd be starting later too. But I'll make sure that any instructional piece we're doing or anything that we need to go over is done by 7:30 for next week. That's not a definite, but there's a dress rehearsal happening at my school, and I'm just trying to gauge from the person running it how late they think that dress rehearsal is going to run.
Is the classroom open if you're not here? Like if we decide we want to just come
It is not, however, Dr. Bed does teach a class here on Wednesday nights, and he's always here before this class starts. So if you wanted to come and meet with your, like if you wanted to meet with your group here early, maybe just send him an email, and I'll contact him too, just so it's not out of left field. But
Yeah, what about that big blue chair, that Adirondack chair? I was just
Yeah.
really
It's
nice.
a comfy spot.
It was really
there's got to be a
comfy.
Starbucks in there.
Yeah, right.
But anyways, if you wanted to get in, especially next week, since I'll be
Right
starting
across-
later than
right
normal,
across the
I
street,
can
right?
let him know, and
Okay.
it's just a matter of him coming down and unlocking the lab, and I'm sure he'd be okay with
Really?
that.
You've been in the library?
Starbucks in the library. No.
Oh, I remember that from actually a year or so ago.
Oh, okay, yeah, well,
It's
I've been in the library for 10 years.
Yeah, they were just put. I think it hadn't opened. I can't even remember why I was over there, but they were like in the process of constructing it.
Really
at
nice.
that time.
No.
So, all right. So that's thing number 2 is that next week possibly we'll start a little later than normal. And then again, just I like to always do kind of just a quick overview of where we're headed because we are now well past the halfway point. The end of the tunnel is starting to appear. So we have, and I should pull this up just so because pulling numbers out of my head right now is just a recipe for disaster. So the next week, like I said, we've got things to do. So next week we have more or less a normal week. What we're aiming for, I think I had originally said that the week of April 24th are going to be our beta testing week, I believe. That seems to be still on track to do that. So that's still a month away. So that would be when essentially your game should be done at that point. You will have a chance to have other people actually engage in some gameplay with it. And then if there's any final fixes that come out of that. And I want to do it that week so that then you still have a couple of weeks to make any adjustments that need to be made. So the 24th, aim for the 24th for essentially your game to be playable if there's still details or graphics or things like that. We are going to be doing a somewhat reduced gamification project, and we're going to start on that tonight. We're going to talk about gamification, and I'm going to kind of break that activity up across several weeks so that it's not a big thing you're having to produce all at once, but we'll kind of build that project. And I have reduced the scope of my original idea on that, again, just because we ran into all the issues with weather at the beginning of the course. But we will get started on that tonight. And really, that project itself won't be due until the end of the course as well. So you'll have plenty of time to finish that in addition to the game. I know I built one weekend. Maybe that was the 24th. I can't remember honestly off the top of my head. I should pull up.
Is that the individual project?
The gamification, yes. But it's not, that one is strictly like a paper planning thing. You're not going to be creating physical objects and things like that. Well, when we get into it tonight, you'll have a much clearer idea of kind of what that is going to be about. So that's much more about just developing a plan or some ideas for how to do a thing. So we've got, after tonight, 6 more weeks to go. And a lot of that time is going to be available to you to work in your groups on the games, because I know that's the biggest piece of the thing. But I'll try to incorporate, some new little elements each week. And if you have things that you want support on, please don't hesitate to ask either. All right. So with all of that said, and I hope that was coherent, are there questions, concerns, anything that you would like me to address before we move into other things? Yes.
As far as game pieces, so for ours, I had found things I wanted to use like this. Is this okay to use, or do we have to physically make something?
No.
This is fine.
No. Yeah. You all have to go out and
Just wanted
buy
to make sure I
3D
this is clay.
3D printers.
Why did you
No.
wanted us to
Sorry, I feel like I'm
something.
teasing. No. Again, this, maybe it's important to sort of restate that this class is not about it's not a production class. If this was a class, a Photoshop class, then obviously the key thing would be using Photoshop to create the images and make them beautiful and all that. This class is about the instructional design. What is a game? Making it instructional, educational. So yes, I mean, it would be nice for your game to have a unified design look to it, and if there are people in your group who have some skill, I mean, that's another thing. People in this room are all in different places in the program. So some people have had the Photoshop class, and that could be useful for some things. Some people, So I didn't want to make it about that. Yes, I will be looking at the final product, and it wouldn't be nice if it, presented itself well. But I'm not going to be expecting people to hand carve game pieces
Whittle.
and
I'm not willing my pieces.
yeah. He's got rubbing band-aids on all his fingers and splinters.
Okay, just checking.
It's like the end of Monsters Inc. When
When he puts the
when
door
Mike
back
Wazowski has put the door back together for and it they zoom in on he's got and his hands are all torn up because he's been going through all the splinters and trying to get them put back together. So anyway, so that's did that answer
Yes.
your question? Okay, so yeah. So any other concerns I should address at this point or questions? All right. So let's then go to this thing. So the first thing for tonight is I do want to talk about games versus gamification. I know a while ago now, it feels like forever ago, there was a forum where I had you kind of just brainstorm your own thoughts about what this might possibly mean. Gamification is a relatively new word. It is something that's being used more and more. You can actually, don't do this because I want you to see what you come up with, but you can go to a dictionary website and find it as an actual word. So even though it feels like something I made up, it is an actual concept now. And it is a concept that is gaining a lot of traction for really one main reason, one particular advantage of it. So I thought a good place to start would be to review what we developed as what I think is a pretty useful, functional definition of a game, which was a system of rules in which agents compete by making meaningful, ambiguous decisions to reach a defined end game. So that's what we've been working on. We've been trying to assure through the design process that your games have a system of rules, that you've decided who are the competitive agents, whether that's people versus people or people versus the rules. Hopefully you've been incorporating the meaningful, ambiguous part of it. And honestly, from an instructional game standpoint, that's usually one of the tougher nuts to crack because a lot of education, we tend to focus on things that have the right answer. And if a game is constructed out of simply things that just have the right answer, then it's more of a puzzle that they're solving than an actual game. But I've been hearing some good discussions about how to make the decisions ambiguous and meaningful so that the game can have multiple outcomes. And then the defined end game, and you guys have been working on that too. So maybe trying to reach back in your brains about what you might have written earlier, or even just now that we've got this as a background, how do we think gamification is different than gaming, or what would we define gamification as? Go for it.
Well, I would just use the ending of the word, just analyzing language, and then usually most things that end in TION are some type of process or action. So I would say that it is the action or process of taking something and turning it into a game or system of rules in which agents compete by making meaningful.
Okay. So I like the language analysis. My brain would not be able to come up with that at this point. So, all right. So basically, it's the process of turning something into one of these. All right. How do we feel about that? Do we thumbs up, thumbs down, thumbs sideways, thumbs up? Oh, there's a whole bunch.
I was wondering what it was.
See, there's this big black bar is actually there for a reason.
I was wondering what it was.
You unwrapped
No.
your Christmas presents.
She was that kid.
Shaking the box.
Yep.
So, so okay. Well, so let's go with that for right now. What would be the why would we want to do that? What
It's
might
fun,
be
right? Making things fun.
okay, and making something fun.
I don't know, when we had talked about it earlier, or a couple weeks ago, there's a lot of like businesses and companies that turn things into games to get consumers to wanna participate in things.
Okay, so engagement, yeah. I should have this. I think I don't have this
To
editable
make
right
a
now.
task
Hang
that
on.
is sometimes perceived as undesirable or tedious or unpleasant into something
exciting.
Yeah, well, the engagement factor, something that they would want to,
Make untedious.
yeah.
Want to participate. Am I spelling? Okay.
So is it usually a task that you gamify?
What do we think? Is that
Is it
Is
a
that-
task that you would gamify?
It was
Or a
already a
thing.
game that
It
was
would be a
already made
task,
up that you just plug
right?
in
so?
learning objectives.
So we have an idea that it's something like an existing game that gets added into something, or is
Or
it
that
taking a
you
task?
take your objectives and plug it into the existing game.
Okay, so plugging another activity into an existing game structure
Or an
Yeah.
objective.
or an objective.
Right.
I would say something that's not fun already, that you make fun by using the game.
I used gamification when I was a cashier at the grocery store. I used to see how fast I could do it.
Okay.
Gamification.
I mean, with the people's
like I
groceries,
said,
it could be
parents
real.
gamify things.
Sorry, you're right.
Like it's time to brush your teeth. Let's see how fast you can get into your jammies. Let's see how fast you can.
So what are you trying to when you're doing that as a parent? You're trying to what's the word?
Add one of the 8.
Trick them into doing something they
Yeah, engage them or
Let's
Yeah,
see who can keep their eyes
motivate.
closed the longest.
Right.
Quiet
I like
game.
I like the word motivation. That's something totally different. That's all right. So trying to. Why doesn't it like that? Oh, motivation. I told you motivation. It's going to be touch and go tonight. I'm just going to go with it. Okay. So so making people want to participate, giving them motivation. All of that speaks to me. What you're trying to do is there's one way to motivate people to do something they don't, which is to simply force them to do it, make them do it. But all of these seem to rely on making the person who's doing the activity want to do it themselves, right?
And when, I was gonna say,
Intrinsic
and
motivation.
When you make someone, they'll do it, but they'll do.
They may not.
They'll do it
bare minimum,
grudgingly.
And they'll do it
Right.
grudgingly. If it's fun, then they want to do it. They are.
Right.
And there's also
And-
more recall that way.
Right. What do we know about educational theory and research? Yeah. So take that, which means
And they own
Yeah.
it.
yeah, that learning generally increases. We've seen this in research when it's the student that is the one wanting to do the learning. Right? That's sort of the whole goal of all these different new sets of national standards. Is it's all trying to move the motivational aspect onto the students. Yeah, I mean the difference in my rock students between being in a wind ensemble where the director says, here's the piece you're going to play, and they may get on board with that eventually, or my rock students who decide, here's a piece we want to play, and they bring that to me, they've got the intrinsic motivation in that case. They have developed a reason why this is something they want to do, and that's going to drive them much better towards achieving, you hope. So yeah, so this is all great stuff. There is, should I unveil the big black bar at this point? You know, are you like on it? So we're actually really close. What was the one thing that's maybe an adjustment to this, or do you remember what you read?
Honestly, the only word I remember is process.
So yeah, so let's see. What did I do to change this? It was the background, which is somewhere up here. Get rid of that. Okay. So yeah, so we're really close to it now. The one thing that I would differ with is that if something is gamified, the understanding is that it somehow is still not a game. There is still some element. Otherwise, it would just be, here's a game, and you're playing a game, and that's what you guys are doing in your groups. So gamifying usually implies that there are elements of a game that are being added into a non-game activity, but we're not taking it all the way to just playing a game. So
Well,
there's
that's what I
a
was
little
gonna say.
distinction.
That end game piece, like a game has the end game, but if you're using gamification for a task, then it's not just the end game. You have another objective in some other, it's almost like a double objective.
Right,
Like you have
or
other things that might not necessarily be associated with the end game of the game.
right. Or another way to look at it, if we go back to the main bolded things here, the rules, the agents, the ambiguous decisions, and the end game. That's sort of our 4 criteria for a game. I would say that it could actually be any of those. So you could gamify an activity simply by maybe defining a clear system of rules that the students have to follow to do it. You know, to go this way, you have to only walk on the line and only whatever. It could be the agents competing, and that is done quite a bit, where rather than just having students do things, you kind of put one group versus the other group, and how fast, you know, which group is going to get there first, or who can come up with the most answers. You know, making the decisions. I mean, that one's maybe a little tougher to simply gamify by itself. But the idea of taking something that maybe normally would only have just one clear-cut answer and somehow making it more interactive because the people feel like they are actually affecting the outcome in some way. Or the end game, you know, simply putting some sort of a period on the end of the activity. Who's going to do this first or something like that? And it could be a combination of them. I mean, I guess my view is that with the 4 things here, any 1, 2, or 3 of those in some combination really implies that you're gamifying the activity. If you get to all 4, then what you've really just done is create a game, which there may not be anything wrong with that. But with most activities, you don't want to have to get into the design of all of those aspects in order to increase that participation. So does that, anyone want to dispute that or comment on that? Or does that make sense as a framework for gamification?
In our project, we're making a game.
We are making a game. That the group project is a game. We're trying to achieve all 4 of these things. The individual gamification project, which we will get underway, is gamification. You will be essentially, quick overview, you will be taking some benign activity that's either part of your classroom or part of your daily life or part of something you engage with, something that is normally non-intrinsically motivational. And then you are going to be trying to develop some strategies for adding game elements in order to make it more intrinsically motivational. That's sort of the bottom line overview of it. Okay? So that's the idea.
I don't understand how what we're doing is not gamification. I I mean, I know we're making a game, but how is what we're doing not gamification? I feel like it is. I feel like
It's like everything's gamification, but only certain things are games.
Right, yeah, what, the project, um,
Right, it is.
random. We didn't mean to scare you away. Yeah, there exists some Venn diagram of this, where we are going through the gamification process in order to reach, in the end, an actual full game. So along the way, we're kind of doing the same things. You've taken an activity, although in some cases it's maybe not take.
Learning objectives, I feel like that's what we're gamifying, is our learning objectives. That's what
Right,
we're
right.
gamifying.
Maybe
Comfort zone,
one
yeah.
difference with the games is that you're taking an educational goal, whereas this is maybe taking an activity that already exists that just maybe isn't exciting or motivational. Like the game will motivate the students too, but we're kind of building the game from an idea from scratch. Here's a problem we're trying to solve. Whereas the implication here is that we're maybe taking an existing activity and simply trying to morph it to give
Okay,
it
I
more
gotcha.
intrinsic motivation. Whereas the building of the full game, you're not necessarily starting. You might have started with an activity. I mean, depending on your group and how you develop the idea, it might be something like, well, in my class, we have this activity where we're trying to get people to eat the right foods, and they're just not very motivated to learn about it. But typically, it's more like, just use a household example. My kids never get their laundry into the laundry basket. Why? They're not motivated to. It's a normal, mundane, unexciting activity. So we're going to try to add some elements into that activity that may make them just want to do it on their own, but without turning it into a full-fledged game with a full set of rules. And I mean, in that case, we're probably not doing ambiguous decisions, right? We want them to get the clothes into the basket, but maybe it's a point system, or if you've got multiple kids, they're competing against each other to see who has the fewest number of clothes left on their floor at the end of the week, or so adding elements like that. That's usually the implication of gamification, is that it's taking a normally, somebody used the word boring, I think, uninteresting task, and trying to spice it up a bit, trying to add something into it, because research has found that there's something that just motivates people when they get into a gaming mindset. We even if the thing that they're doing is completely uninteresting or idiotic, we still suddenly want to do it because it's part of a game. So it's taking that piece out of the game and trying to apply it to something that normally would not have that. Yeah.
I think it's part of this conversation is that because we're building an educational game, it's a little bit grayer because, and I think most of us started from a point where we said, well, this is something that they struggle with or find tedious.
Yeah.
Let's build a game to make it more fun, as compared to the laundry example.
Sure.
We're
Yep.
just taking a non-educational task and adding some fun so people do it. We're actually taking a learning task,
Right.
and adding some fun, but formalizing it to hit all the
Yeah.
goals.
I mean, another common, this was actually, it was the business world that invented this term. And they still are the ones that tend to use it the most, although it is now coming into education more and more. But the idea of, say, for example, our school is now a Microsoft school. And they have a whole website called MIE, which is Microsoft Innovative Educators. And you can get certified as an MIE instructor. How do you get certified? You go to this website. They have all these different videos about various different things you can do with Microsoft software. A lot of them are videos, little self-contained courses. You complete one of the courses, you earn points, you earn stars. And when you earn so many stars, you get this little certificate that you can print out and send to your school administrator saying, I'm now MIE certified. But what they're using is somebody who may not really have an interest in going to that website and sitting through some courses, just adding that little thing of earning points, earning stars, earning that certificate in the end, is designed to then motivate people to kind of compete with each other and how many more points can I earn. And so that business has been trying to use that a lot to try to get people to do things that they normally wouldn't have much of an interest in doing.
I just thought of like a good example of what gamification looks like. So when you have like businesses and they come up with rewards programs for their customers,
Mm-hmm.
that would be an example. Of
Sure.
rewards of a gamification.
Right. I mean, in a way, so what would that be? So they create a system of rules, which is basically you need to sign up for this program, and then when you purchase at our thing, tell us that you're part of our rewards program, and we will track how much you've spent, and then when you've spent X amount of money, you'll get a reward. We'll take $10 off of your purchase, or you'll get a free bag of whatever. So yeah, I mean, Kohl's Cash. Yeah, exactly. You know, and in that case, the encouraging participation, I mean, they're not doing this out of the goodness of their heart. They're doing it because research has shown that when you engage people in those programs and they could maybe go to store X or store Y to purchase something they need, they'll go, oh yeah, but if I go here, I get points, or I get Kohl's bucks, or whatever they call them, Kohl's Cash, or whatever, and that, you know, yes, that gives you something tangible. That's sort of the end game aspect of it, of getting to that. But they've also found that people will tend to spend a little bit more because they know they'll get to that reward faster, or
Things I didn't know I needed.
yeah. I mean, the program I belong to is Blue Seal, which is for chicken feed, because I'm buying 50-pound bags of chicken feed each month. But, you know, when I go in and I give them my card number and they say, oh, you know, actually one bag is free this time, I'm like, yeah, yay me. You know, it's not like a bag of chicken feed. Yeah, but it's there is something intrinsically motivational about the gaming mentality that the business world especially kind of discovered early and have been trying to use to their advantage. And now, in a similar vein, education has sort of said, oh, could we use this too? And that's where we're starting. I mean, it could be, again, it's something as simple as just what the students do when they come into your classroom. Is there a routine you want them to follow? So you gamify it, you know, who gets there first, or who checks off the most things, or who, whatever, you know, the possibilities are kind of up to your. So
Any basic token economy kind of thing can be like that's gamification.
Yeah.
You
I
give
mean,
back $5 if you're,
yeah, I mean, so many things now you see where you
no, high $5.
you earn certificates, or you earn points, or you earn something that's using a gaming mentality. You know, you do X, and as a result, you get Y. And you feel like you're gaming the system by getting free stuff, but in the end, what you've actually done is spent more at that place than, yeah. Oh, if you spent $10 more, then you'd get $40 off your purchase. Okay, well, I don't really need this thing right here, but I'll throw that in because then it'll cost less. Well, but now you've actually bought something you didn't need, and whatever. It's all psychology and all of that. So, yeah. So yeah, this is all great, but this, you know, hopefully using this as maybe an approach to say, here's our 4-point definition, and gamification in our context is going to mean here is boring, mundane, unmotivational task. Can we take some combination of these 4 and apply it to that boring, mundane task, and therefore make it something that a greater number of people will want to do or want to complete? And I think that's a good model to use in terms of thinking about this as a process. So it's like gaming light. We're not taking it all the way to the end of full-fledged game, but we're borrowing from what makes
So there
games so
really no,
fun.
like, when we're talking about the games, like, we have a set criteria that have to be followed. But when you gamify, it's pretty ambiguous,
There's
right?
it's more it's loosey goosey. Yeah, there's
like,
there's
okay, so
there's
it
nothing
can be
that says
virtually anything mundane that is made fun.
by
And that's like
by adding game-like
game-like
elements.
elements.
So again, and it could be one or a combination of
Yeah.
them. You know, like I said, just defining an end game to an activity sometimes can be enough to make people
Yeah.
want to. You know, kids do that all the time. They need to walk from point A to point B. So what do? Who's going to touch the tree first? You know, they've now defined an end game.
Yeah.
Who gets there first? They're still doing the same thing. They're still moving from point A to point B, but now they've turned it into a contest. They've now turned it into something by, you know, defining this, and maybe you could also consider that, you know, a system of rules that, and actually agents competing. Now it's the two of them against each other. They've got a set of rules. Run as fast as you can.
If you,
Don't trip each other.
if your gamification project all of a sudden has more than 2 or 3 of this, now is it all of a sudden not gamification and has turned into a game, or?
You are still engaging the gamification process. That goes a little beyond what's the generally accepted. Most definitions, I tweak this a little bit from what I was finding, but most of them stop short. You know, they'll all say uses elements of gaming, or uses pieces of game design, or uses a part of a game, of game theory. So there is an understanding that something that's gamified is somehow still not, has not reached the threshold of being a full-fledged game. But that's fine. They're not, that doesn't lessen what it does. Because what you're trying to do here is usually take something that's already happening and just make it more motivational. So, yeah.
I think along those lines, it's, even when it's gamified, you might get some enjoyment out of having to do it, but you're not necessarily going to choose to go get someone else's laundry and put it into the basket.
Right.
Unless that was part of the points also, but I mean, you know,
Yeah.
So,
And a lot of this is the participation and the self-motivation. Like that's really, if you're going to use a rubric, not a rubric, an indicator, a standard that you have to achieve for something to really be considered gamified, it's did it increase the intrinsic participation or intrinsic motivation by doing this? If you take a boring activity and you just put some rules on it and it doesn't make it any more fun or interesting to do, that's not really gamified. That sort of goes against the thought behind it. All right. So just to maybe follow up on this, is we've actually already pointed out some good examples in class. Just, you know, I want to give you guys a good chunk of time tonight to work, and I want to go over the what's going to be needed in your games, because I haven't really talked about that as an end of the process thing. But I do want to take a little bit of time to sort of develop this a little bit. So let's see, 2, 4, 5, 8, 10, 11. We're an odd number, so whatever, one group of 3 or something like that. But just maybe throw out an example of a boring, mundane activity. It doesn't have to be something educational. Just think of something we haven't already talked about. And then take that, and what I would say is, as a thought exercise, take our 4 defining characteristics and say, here's boring activity. If we were to try to gamify it by adding a system of rules, what might that look like? You know, and you may find it harder or easier to do depending on what you've picked. But just talk about what that might look like to use that as your gamification approach. What would it look like to add competing agents into that activity? So sort of take each one at a time and try to see if you could gamify the activity by simply adding one of our 4 game definers, and what that might do to improve the motivation for it. And then if you want to talk more generally and say, well, is there a combination of these that might be the best approach to use? So start by looking at each of the 4 by themselves, and could you apply those to a thing to make it more fun? And then once you've gone through the 4, then maybe say, okay, well, if we're just being given free reign, what maybe could we do to, combine 1 or 2 or 3 of these things together to maybe make the ultimate gamification of this activity. And then we'll come back and just kind of share out what thing you were trying to gamify and so on. So does that make sense?
Yes.
I mean, this is basically what I'm having you do is just kind of walk through in small groups the kind of thing you're going to be doing for the actual gamification project. So it'll give you an idea of the kinds of questions you ask and the ways of thinking about things that might be a little different. All right. So yeah, it is, wow, it's already 5:50. Woohoo. I also haven't seen my family since Saturday, so that's another piece of my.
Yeah, we're okay
No.
with that.
No, well, we would never want to.
Yeah, I can't shortchange your education. We could never do that. So I don't know. I don't want to take a huge amount of time on this, but let's take 20 minutes or so just to do some brainstorming. You might come up with some different ways to add each of these things to whatever activity. So in each group, just pick one activity. Don't, just find something you think would be a really good candidate for gamifying. It doesn't have to be educational. It could be just something from daily life. And then, like I said, just apply each of the 4 game requirements to it. Throw out some things. See if you think they would work to improve motivation. And then see if you can come up with maybe sort of a master plan of gamifying that activity that would make it super exciting, where everybody would want to do it nonstop, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. Never ending. All right? So let's, I can just let you guys kind of pair off, right? We could count on 1, 2, 1, 2. It's like, I love that you tell students to count off and then they mess it up. 1, 2, 1, 2. Wait, which one was, you get done. Wait, which one was I? 1, 2, 1.
We do fingers
Yeah.
up. Fingers up.
And they still mess it up.
Pencils are the best thing ever.
What's that?
Grouping pencils, each pencil is a different color, has a different shape and a different number.
Yeah.
Kayla, you're next level.
Awesome.
Yeah. So anyway, so like I said, we have an odd number, so there will be one group of 3, but the rest of you should be working in pairs. And you don't need to type this up or anything if you want to jot ideas down on paper. We will share out what people came up with just to see what you did. So whatever you need to do to just keep track of whatever you've said. At this point, I wouldn't remember anything that I say. So, but yeah, let's take 20-ish minutes or so, unless it looks like everybody's done and bored. Ooh, maybe I could gamify the activity. No, it's all good. You get points for how many different ways you can, or we'll rate the motivation on scale of whatever.
And what would be, what, okay, well,